Welcome to week 6, team building and characteristics of innovation, organization, and leaders. Also, I'll talk a little bit about the Google case that you're working on this week. I'd be also happy to answer any questions if anybody has any questions about their projects. I've been answering questions online. Folks seem to be doing reasonably well. Some of you have fallen a little behind in this course. I'm a little bit worried about a few of you. Out of 60, fortunately, it's only maybe 4 or 5 that are really having a lot of difficulty. I strongly encourage you to participate in every part of this course in order to bring yourself up to speed. If you can, participate in this live section so that you could ask questions. I really would appreciate getting more questions. I don't really want to just sit here and talk about things that I think you might be interested in. I'd much rather talk about the things that you are interested in and answer your questions, but those have been a little bit slow in coming. I know that many of you have other obligations, which mean that you watch this at another time. I understand that and I appreciate that. That's why we have the online course. But it is a time when you could get some face-to-face time with me and try to resolve some issues. Of course, I do watch the email back and forth with each of you, and I found that we've been able to interact reasonably well on that email. All right, let me just then spend a little bit of time just going over some of the issues of team building and talk about some of the kind of important points to be made. I know that some of you have already begun to take the Building Your Knowledge test. I discovered there's a little bit of a typo on one of the questions, which led to it being graded incorrectly. I have fixed that typo. It should be graded correctly now. If you have had any problem with that, then please do contact me either by asking questions here or by email, and I'm sure we can work this out. Of course, the test is short. It's just a quiz. So if you are kind of not sure about it, you might just want to go back and check your answers and fix any answer that might have been graded as incorrect. But if you think you've got a correct answer that was graded as incorrect, then you should contact me and I'll check it. So far, I haven't seen any of those, but I just want to be sure that everybody gets a fair shake on this thing. Okay. Well, when we look at Wise and Feld, I do enjoy the book because they have a very specific perspective. It's really the perspective of an investor's perspective. And as a result, with that perspective, it's not always based on kind of the best research and statistics on what happens, but it is a very accurate reflection of how the investment community feels about venture and some of the senses. His chapter on team building, of course, which you've read already, it opens with a few quotes, and really they're quotes that express how important investors and others that are in the venture community, how important they see the team is. And they say things like, I bet on the jockey, not on the horse, okay? In other words, I bet on the team, not on the company. Or they say, an A team with a B idea beats a B team with an A idea. Okay, so that one is a little more controversial, but it's something that is pretty widely believed, that an A team with a B idea beats a B team with an A idea. I think it'd be a little fair for them to say an A team with an A idea always beats a B team with an A idea. And we're going to come back to that later because there's some research that talks about the importance of the idea as well as and we have already talked about that when we spoke earlier about trying to develop a competitive advantage in a product that the market would want. That is also very, very important. The other nice little trite quote that they like to get was, people is to opportunity as location is to real estate. This is almost a joke because, of course, the joke is that real estate agents always say there's only three things that are important in real estate: location, location, and location. In other words, the quality of the house isn't as important as the location. If it's a great house in a lousy location, it's got a low value. If it's an average house in a great location, it has a higher value. Um, okay, so there's clearly some truth in these perspectives, and it's especially true that many in the community believe that. And what we learn in fields in management in particular is that the psychology and um, the perceptions are as important, maybe even more important in many cases, than the reality. That drives me crazy as a scientist. That drives the engineers in this class crazy. I realize that. I'm sorry about that, but in fact, we know that perceptions are very, very important, and the psychology. And we've talked about some of the psychology of investors in the past. So what does research on this tend to tell you? And in this kind of the narrative of the community and the research is pretty much on the same page. And that is that teams are best if they're small teams, 2 to 4 people, seem to be the most successful. Large teams have a hard time coordinating when they're getting started, and they those teams are good if they have complementary skills and experience rather than identical skills and experience. Just using the iLink case, which we can go back to often because I know it so well and you have now studied it. Um, we had 3 founders, so we were in that 2 to 4 range, right? I was this gray hair, if you will, the senior person with extensive business contacts, lots of computer experience, lots of technology experience. Uslawel was a tremendous young computer engineer and a great manager, but he was young, didn't have the experience, didn't have the network, didn't have the extensive business contacts, but ferociously bright and very, very new to the field, and so he kind of knew all the new things. Mark Bernstein, he was a top salesperson. He'd been a Top Gun salesperson in industry for Computer Associates. He'd done a startup. So he brought these kinds of complementary skill and experiences in marketing and sales to Uslawel's technology and just overall drive and brilliance to my senior experience and lots of kind of background in a computer, both in the technology ends of computers and in the business ends of that. So it's these diverse abilities that help to make the team function better. Another thing that people say to avoid, although remember, there's no hard, fast rules here, right? Is to, in general, be cautious about founding companies with friends and family. There's always potential conflicts. It's especially difficult, if you're family members and then you get in a fight. The recent Market Basket case, of course, is one of the worst cases where a family just absolutely went to war with each other. And it pits brother against brother and mother against child. When it goes bad, it goes bad. And so if you haven't read about the Market Basket case or you haven't seen the film on the Market Basket case, it's worth having a look at. That said, a lot of people do found companies with friends and family. A lot of people get in fights. So just forewarned is forearmed. When you get started, make sure that you write a clear job description and a written business agreement. That is, I can't tell you how important that is. even if, no matter how good the team is, if you get started and you have a different idea about what it is you're going to be doing, you're really going to have trouble. And it's just, there's so much stress in starting up a new venture, so much angst, and so many times where you can get crossways with each other. If you don't agree on where you're going, then you really have a big problem. And that happens frequently in companies where one person might be, taking the long term and saying, this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. The other person is saying, I want to build this up and sell it. You got a problem. Market basket case, you had one part of the family that wanted to maximize the profit and the margins. You had another part of the family that was taking more of a social entrepreneurship approach. Um, for a while there, the part of the family that wanted to maximize financial return began to win. But then the employees revolted, and the part of the family that wanted to have to view it as a little more as social entrepreneurship, a for-profit business, but not necessarily maximizing a profit, won. It's a great story. If you haven't seen it, watch the movie. The next thing is that the team needs to plan a lot. Same mantra I use all the time. Plan everything, plan a lot, and then plan for what happens when your plan doesn't work. And don't be surprised. Don't panic. Don't quit. Fix it. When the plan doesn't work, fix it. Don't panic. The other key factor after the team is obviously the passion. But you have to balance passion with realistic and grounded. I see a lot of entrepreneurs that are truly passionate, and they hear, oh, you have to have a passion to be an entrepreneur. Right, you do. But you can't let it blind you to reality. And if it does, then you're just going to run into trouble. Coachability, a really, really big thing. As a father of 4 kids, I spent, many, many hours as a coach on various teams, soccer, basketball, baseball, softball, you name it. I even helped, coach hockey a little bit, even though I'm not a hockey player. Um, so it's so nice when you have a kid that you can coach, that will listen to what you say, okay? So coachability is important. It's part of the whole lean launchpad, ethic of learning from your customers, right? If you can't kind of learn, then you're kind of in trouble. You also have to be realistic about your abilities. If you're, if someone asks you, where do you see yourself in 3 years, and you say, I'm the only CEO we'll ever need, you're probably not the CEO you need at all. Okay? If you as the founder say, wherever the company really needs me, then that's going to be much better, because many CEOs many founders do not make good CEOs, and you need a different CEO at different times of the company's history. You've heard me talk again about iLink, that I started as CEO. We struck a deal with our investors and with the board that I would start as CEO. I would work for 18 months, and we would evaluate how we were going, and then I would either quit my university job and do that full time, become CEO full time, or I would go back to the university, which I still was associated with, but I would make that the major focus of my time, and I would hire another CEO to replace me at iLink. When we got to that 18-month period, the board asked me to leave RPI and continue. And I, kind of looked at this thing about, where does the company need me? And I tried to convince myself that I'm not the only CEO we'll ever need. In fact, we need different kinds of CEOs. And so I fired myself. I fired myself on New Year's Eve that year, and hired somebody else. And you know that I, in fact, let that CEO go the next New Year's Eve and hired somebody else again. Because at the different stages of the company, you need different skill sets. So if you're so arrogant that you think you're it, right, you're in trouble. If you're coachable, you'll figure out where can you make the biggest impact, and you will do that because you want the company to be successful. And by the way, if you're the founder, you're going to have a significant share of the profits of that company, share of the stock of that company. So, you know, you're going to do just fine, even if you're not the CEO. So, you want to avoid, saying things that are egotistical and try to show that you value the contributions that others make. Things to think about in team building. From this, I took this from the Founder's Dilemma, anticipating and avoiding pitfalls. So you can see it fits pretty well with my mantra, even though it came from Noam Wasserman in Harvard, because, pitfalls happen, the bumper sticker, stuff happens, or whatever your bumper sticker says. And okay, so what are some of the ways that you can think about building your team? First of all, bring in co-founders who have technical expertise, sales background, or social connections that you lack. You saw how that happened in iLike, right? Make sure that the team has diverse skill sets. You want a wider, more diverse network. Similar people tend to have similar networks. If you all have the same network, then you're not really, I once, this was when I was at UMass, I had a vice president who came, and when we made the change as president, when I became president, he came to me and he said, "Oh, I know you'll want to get your own vice president." And I laughed and I said, you and the last president have exactly the same networks. I have a different network. I'm coming in from outside the state. I'm from New York. I don't even know the people in Massachusetts other than I knew some of the leadership. I knew Teddy Kennedy. I knew John Kerry. I knew Governor Bill Weld, the former Governor Bill Weld. I met Paul Cellucci. So I knew a few of the leader folks, but I didn't have that network. I needed him. I said, "You're more valuable now than you were with the last president who already had that network." And he laughed, and he was a great vice president. So you want to extend your network by getting people in that can extend your network. We already talked about family and friends and the issues. It's what you say avoid. You don't say don't co-found with friends and family, because many people do. And in some situations that works well. Restaurants are often founded that way. There are family businesses that are founded that way, and they work together with family, and that's great. That's great. All we're saying here is just be careful, because your family is your family. You want to have them be your family your entire life, and you don't want a business dispute to break up the family the way it did at Market Basket. And make sure that everybody knows what it is they're supposed to do, that there's a division of labor, and plan for conflict. We come back to that all the time. It's going to happen. Stuff happens. And so don't try to avoid it. Try to plan for it. The talent triangle we talk about are three of the things that you want to make sure you have on the team. You want to have some domain knowledge. Depends on what the company is. If you're founding a restaurant, you want people there that know something about the restaurant business. If you're founding a computer software startup, you want people that know about the type of computer software in that area, and that's great. You want people with business acumen. You want individuals that have have run a business, have a sense about it, and kind of know what it takes. Know that that money is important, not because we have such a love of money. You may or may not have a love of money. You may not be motivated by profit when it was called wealth. You might be more like Mother Teresa. But the truth is that if Mother Teresa didn't raise enough money, she was not going to be treating any sick people. And you need a business acumen to be able to do that. The third leg of that talent triangle is operational experience. It really helps if you have people that have kind of operated something in this. Again, do you have operational experience of bringing software to market? Frankly, I had lots of domain knowledge in software when we started iLink, and frankly, I had a fair amount of business acumen and experience. Did I have operational experience running a software company? No, I did not, and I had to fill that out. And in fact, that's why I hired the CEO that I did 18 months in to fill out that kind of operational experience. The other thing you need are lots of individuals around you that you can seek advice from. And some of those are mentors. I've had mentors my whole life. Thank goodness, I had mentors when I started iLink. Even if I didn't take their advice, they were incredibly valuable to me. And by the way, when you don't take your advice, it always helps if you at least thank them and be nice about it and explain why you're not going to take the advice. But you saw that I didn't take the advice of Warren Brueggemann, who came in and told me that there's no way we could found iLink by selling software before the software is delivered. The companies wouldn't buy it. Well, I'd had a lot of experience in that field. He was a brilliant guy. I accepted almost all the advice he gave me. I did not accept that piece of advice, and we made it work. Okay, so mentors are very, very important. Sometimes you formalize that, put them on a board of advisors. The board of advisors is a good group because they can give you advice, but they don't have any control of the company. You also put people on a board of directors. And a board of directors, they hire and fire the CEO and maybe even some of the other staff of the company. So they are the governance for the company. So you want a different kind of an individual on the board of directors than on the board of advisors. Also, some people don't want to be on the board of directors because even though a corporation has protection from liability, assuming this was a corporation, that protection from liability is not absolute. They call it piercing the veil, and they can sue the board of directors. So some people don't want to expose themselves to liability, so they want to be on a board of advisors because they don't have any liability, right? They're not making decisions for the company. The board of directors is, and they can be sued, although they do have some protection from liability. Sometimes these individuals will provide, you can put an attorney on your board of directors, perhaps, and they will provide pro bono legal work, help you out for free, or maybe for deferred payment. There are other individuals like that you can put on your board of directors. Of course, as we've seen in the Lean Launchpad, the real advice comes from the customers. In some sense, that's the only advice about the product that that really matters to you. Your board of advisors could tell you it's a great product. Your mentors could tell you it's a great product. If the customers tell you it's not a product that they're going to buy, they rule. Customers rule. The old joke about customers are always right. Well, they may not always be right, but basically you should listen to them, and you'll learn a lot about the market from that. Sometimes they call these days in the high-tech business in Silicon Valley and all, they call customer acquisition growth hacking, because you're trying to hack the growth of the company by bringing in customers. And social capital is a key factor. We've talked about Metcalfe's law, how the value of a network goes up as the square of the number of individuals or nodes in the network. So if you have a large network, you're going to be able to use that social capital to advance your company. If you have a small network, it's not going to go as well. That's one of the reasons why, again, when we talked about getting founders in, you want to get founders that help you expand that social network. That's sometimes referred to as network economics. And as we saw, that explains why Google is more valuable than Yahoo and why Facebook crushed MySpace and other social network sites and other kinds of things. Once people pick something and leave the others, and right now it looks like they're picking Instagram and leaving Snapchat. Not everybody, of course. It's still early, and it could turn around, but the data right now indicates that they are. If Instagram establishes enough of a lead over Snapchat, then it's going to be just like Yahoo. They may stick around, but they'll be a pale imitation. Google dominates Yahoo at this point, and if Instagram is successful at pulling out enough of a lead on Snapchat, Instagram will dominate. We shall see. Um, entrepreneurial awareness or entrepreneurial alertness. Uh, two terms, they mean the same thing, just two different ways of saying that. It's some people just don't see opportunities. Some are really good at seeing an opportunity and going for it. Others will see the same problem every day and just complain about the problem, and they'll never see the opportunity. So there's been a lot of research done to try to figure out why is it that some people do that. What seems to be important in being able to recognize opportunities? Well, prior experience is usually important. If you're in the restaurant business and you've been in the restaurant business and you see that there's a niche that's missing in your community, based on that prior experience, you might recognize that as an opportunity where someone else would not. But experience doesn't tell the whole story. There are some cognitive factors, entrepreneurial alertness, which is just a way that people have of thinking. Some people just seem to be wired to think about problems as opportunities. And, yes, market awareness, a sensitivity to the market is a big part of that. Social networks help. There's a difference between a solo entrepreneur and a network entrepreneur. But even if you're a solo entrepreneur, if you have a big social network, you tend to be more alert to the opportunities around you. We talk about two different kinds of relationships that people can have. There's strong tie relationships where you have frequent interactions, and those people often tend to see problems in the same way. And you have weak tie relationships where infrequent. And weak tie relationships are actually shown to lead to more ideas and different perspectives because you're kind of not seeing it the same way. If you've all been, say, entrepreneurs working in Chevrolet dealerships, you're going to see a new dealership the same way. So when Tesla comes along, you're going to have preconceived notions. Whereas if you're working with somebody that has worked in, say, social media marketing, and Tesla comes along, you might say, hey, there's a better way to market Tesla than the standard way that we did it with Chevy and Ford. The other factor is obviously creativity, and that's the process of generating new, unique, and useful ideas. There's a certain amount of research on that tends to indicate that this can be improved through teaching, but it still remains somewhat controversial as whether creativity is something you have or something that you can develop. It appears to be something you can develop, but it's not easy. So some of the components of an innovative organization would be a shared vision, an appropriate structure, key individuals, effective team working, high involvement in innovation. In other words, if you do innovation, you're more likely to do it again in the future. If you've always done things the same way, you're not likely to think of new things to do in the future. Creative climate. You want to create a climate that reinforces those who think outside the box and have creative ideas. You don't want to just kind of slam down on them because, oh, we tried that. That didn't work before. It's not going to work this time. Or, oh, that's a lousy idea. Here's why it's going to fail. Take the time to think it through. They may have something. The other thing is that very innovative organizations tend to have an external focus. They are looking outside. They're not looking at the company, kind of structure and the way the company did business. We've seen a lot of companies that had to reinvent themselves. Some have been successful and some haven't. Some find it very, very difficult, to adapt to a new environment. And they didn't have enough external focus, they had internal focus. Even a company like IBM that has recreated itself many, many times and is in the process of trying to do it again. And I say trying to do it because it seems to be making it happen, but the jury's still out. And surely sooner or later, they'll all, fail at some point to do this. But even IBM has had a few near-death experiences where they became so focused on what they did and the way they did it that when the world had moved to a different place, it took them a while to realize, wait a minute, the way we're doing it is not working anymore. We better do it this way. I had a friend who was a vice president of IBM at the time that IBM was going through this at the kind of the end of the PC era. They had really done very well with the IBM PC. It was very exciting. They had the IBM way. You kind of wore a light blue shirt. Everybody dressed the same. People worked for the company, had lifetime employment. Nobody was ever fired. They had a whole bunch of stuff going on. And then it wasn't working anymore. And they panicked and they started thrashing around. They would spin off things and they would do this. And then next day they would do that. Next day. And a new CEO came in called Lou Gerstner. And my friend Nick D'Onofrio went in to see him and started saying, well, we could do this, or we could do this, or we could do this. And Lou just said, settle down. Settle down. Let's stop thrashing. Let's put a strategy together and, calmly work through this. Well, he did reinvent the company into a very, very successful company again. And but companies always require reinvention. And IBM is there now. GE, if you read the paper, is having a near-death experience. It's hard to know what GE will be. But the truth is that GE's been through this several times, and they're a company that has lasted a very, very long time by being innovative and being able to fix themselves. So would I bet against them this time, even though they're having such great difficulties? No, I wouldn't bet against them at all. Not sure I'd bet on them either, but they certainly have a chance. It's not clear how it's going to turn out. Okay, so I have a number of slides that are coming up here that I'm going to, kind of just pass over because I've really talked about these things as I presented in Chapter 1, the passion for business, product customer focus, as Steve Jobs says, tenacity despite failure, execution intelligence, why does the world care? We're gonna come back to some of these issues in future chapters. And right now we're focused on the team. And remember how we, said, an A team with a B product beats a B team with an A product. And then we're gonna come back and see what Mark Andreessen, one of the great innovators in Netscape and in the internet, said just the opposite. He said, unless you have a great product, a great team really isn't going to, cut it for you. So, okay, they disagree. Well, we'll talk about that when we get into the product chapter. We've talked about, what are the cognitive characteristics? We said they had some issues that you look for in an innovator. Are these individuals that are always acquiring information and giving out information? Are they individuals that kind of don't care? I mean, one key of this is, are they avid readers? Are they curious? Do they like to discuss different things? Some people do, some people don't. Some people are not curious at all. They just want to do their job, and it's perfectly good, but they're not going to be innovators. Intelligence, obviously. Sense making is a little different than intelligence. It's kind of an ability to synthesize and put things together. So you can be intelligent, but whether or not you can kind of make sense of the big picture is difficult. Unlearning, We talked about, remember those psychological biases we talked about a few weeks ago? One of them was that everybody are very confident and thinks that they're above average. We call it the Lake Wobegon effect. All of our children in Lake Wobegon are above average. It makes it hard to unlearn things that you've learned. You may have learned things which are no longer useful, and you have to unlearn. You have to eliminate an existing routine, a behavior, or a bias, or discard information. Can you? You need to be able to do that to be a good innovator. And you need to make it happen, implementation, and kind of make it happen by experimentation with improvisation. So those are some of the characteristics that you want to have. There's a curtain adaptation innovation, another piece of research that you should know about and very important in management theory and innovation theory. The curtain scale can measure cognitive differences between different kinds of individuals that they classify as adapters or innovators. Now, an adapter tends to kind of agree that, all right, this is what we do. Maybe we can do a little of this. Maybe we can do a little of this. And so they tend to come up with ideas that tweak things but stay within the boundaries that they understand and accept. Innovators are oftentimes will take apart the problem, challenge all the assumptions, and emerge with an unexpected idea, which usually is less acceptable at first until you really think about it. So innovators aren't really concerned with doing things better. They're more concerned with doing things differently, which was a great ad for those who remember the Apple ads of many years ago. They had a guy run up and throw a hammer through a screen and say, think differently. Actually, they said, think different. And then all the English teachers screamed at them that that was bad English. So those are two different kinds of characteristics of innovators, adapters, or those who are innovated. I'm going to let you look at this more detail. He can help you do that. And, if you ever want to find out where you sit, you can go through this list on this page and put yourself in either more of the adapter or more of the innovator scale. Okay. So remember I said we'd come back to that issue of leadership. Research doesn't necessarily substantiate that an A team with a B product will be a B team with an A product. They really see that when it comes to performances in established organizations, so you have to be careful about that. We're talking about new ventures versus established. You only see about 15% of the differences based upon the leadership. So there's 85% of the differences that are based on other things, okay? Now, it's a little better than that because leaders, if you look kind of closely, they contribute about an additional 35% through choices of business strategy, which matter a lot. So it turns out that leaders can affect either directly or indirectly through the choice of business strategy about 50% of the performance of a company. So leadership is very important, just as we saw at the beginning, but maybe not quite as important as the authors, Wise and Feld, think that it is. So it's just something to think about. Okay. All right. These things are kind of obvious that they're characteristics that leaders exhibit. They fit with things we've said before. They're bright, they're alert, they're intelligent. Yeah, they're looking around. They seek responsibility and they take charge. They're skillful in their task domain. They're administratively and socially competent, the important thing, which, frequently I've worked with engineers. They might be really skillful in their task domain. They may seek responsibility. They may be bright, alert, intelligence, but they don't have the social intelligence to be able to be as effective as they should be. In fact, we've tried to develop ways to develop more of that social competence and administrative competence. Energetic, active, resilient, good communicators, yeah, all the above, all important. Okay, these are just some of the creativity components: preparation, incubation, insight, the aha moment when you see a solution, a potential solution. Sometimes the aha turns into, oh darn, or something else. Evaluation, evaluating the idea, and then elaboration, working at the idea. Those are the things. If you're running a business and you want to stimulate innovation, there are things you need to do. You have to have a policy to support it, and you have to reward it. Interestingly, reward, people tend to think about money all the time, and money is certainly often used as a reward, but research tends to show that recognition can be, in fact, as important as money in stimulating the kind of innovative behavior you're looking for. So we said that heterogeneity versus homogeneity in teams, in other words, having some differences in the team is very important. Creating the right climate, for supporting innovation. Giving some autonomy and space. You have to give people a little freedom to do things. They have to have the freedom to make a mistake. We've already talked about the time window, that you have a certain, time, and if you're not timely, it's not a good thing. And evaluation by leaders needs to be done that reinforces the factors that we've just put above. I always got a kick out of H. Ross Perot, who complained about, how he took a position in General Motors, and he was very frustrated with it took him so long to bring a new car to market. He said it takes 5 years to develop a new car in this country. Heck, we won World War II in 4 years, which is true. He was very frustrated working in General Motors, and I don't know if he made much progress, but eventually, with extensive use of teamwork and some of the theories that we've just talked about, we've seen that U.S. automobiles have made progress and have reduced death time. So there's a lot of research on highly effective performance teams, and I hope you'll look into that. I did want to say a little bit about things that get in the way of teams working together. Sometimes you have a group instead of a team, so you're not actually working together as a team. In sports, a lot of us recognize that. The Cleveland Cavaliers this year, if you're a basketball fan, were tremendously underperforming, and pretty much anybody that knew anything about basketball said it was not a basketball team. It was a basketball group. They all kind of did their own thing, and you have LeBron James, that's the greatest basketball player out there, and but they didn't have a team. Okay. Next thing that hinders team is if you are overly specific. If you tell people exactly how to do something, they can't innovate. So being too structured is bad for innovation. And on the other hand, lack of structure means that teams can go wandering off way far afield, use too much time on tasks. So you need some structure, structured freedom. It's a balance kind of a thing. It's not an easy thing to do, but you need to know if you got too much structure, you'll stifle innovation. If you have too little structure, you're going to end up like I talked about IBM a little bit, thrashing all over the place. And you need support for the teams. They need information, they need some training, support structures, and they may even need coaching, as we see. Okay, you can read this on your own, the potential assets and liabilities of using a group. Last thing I want to just say a couple things about is co-creation or conjoint innovation. What research has shown, and here's a list of them, and you know a lot of these folks. You certainly know Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak from Apple, and you probably know Larry Page and Sergey Brin from Google if you followed this week's team building case. You may or may not know about Eduardo Saverin because Mark Zuckerberg is so well known, but they were a very important part of the team. Bill Gates and Paul Allen. Paul, left Microsoft and is doing a whole lot of other things, including building his own space plane. All right, so that's conjoint innovation, where there's a lot of research on that. It shows that that is a particularly powerful model. I've talked already about climate, and just here are the factors that go for creating a good climate: trust and openness, challenge and involvement, support and space for innovation, conflict and debate. Aha! Yeah, that's one that's difficult. Many people try to avoid conflict. If you don't argue about things, you're never going to find an innovative solution. Because if you're always on the same page, you can't think out of the box. There's got to be a little risk-taking, and there has to be some freedom, and you have to be willing to disagree a little bit. Okay, so that kind of summarizes this week's leadership and team, and I hope it's been helpful to you. I'm watching your postings. By the way, I really enjoyed last week's postings of the various projects you're working on, just as I enjoyed reading through all of the papers that you had submitted the previous week on the projects. Wanted the other students to have a chance to see and comment on the projects that you're working on for now. So, glad that that worked out. Well, I hope that if you have any questions about anything that you didn't bring to tonight's session, maybe because you couldn't be involved or for whatever reason, then I hope that you will get back to me on email, and we'll look forward to seeing you on email and on the discussion board this week. Many of you are working through the Build Your Knowledge test or the Check Your Knowledge test to prepare for next week. There's still some of you that are falling behind on those, just a few, but please try to catch up. So thank you very much for being interested in team building tonight, and we'll see you next week. So take care.